Hey everyone, so today I bring you a video from a happy place. I finally solved my dinoflagellants problem in my tank and it is virtually gone. So today I wanted to do a video that really runs through the 4 key aspects, mainly a brief overview of what had happened, what I did to solve it, and if I could rewind time, what I would do, and also some of the questions that I personally had or people had that I have answered. So let's get into it. So as you can see from this video, my dinos are no longer out of control in my tank. My sandbed is more or less entirely white, which is a great feeling. But before I get into how I solve it, I just wanted to give a quick overview of what had happened. And if you have not watched my previous videos, about 2 months back, I started having this algae or this rusty form of algae being formed on the sandbed, and it looked exactly like diatoms, but there was one key difference, and that was that it would disappear from the sand at night, and that was when the lights were off. So over time I kind of figured and kind of suspected that I had dinos, so that started my journey of trying to get rid of it. I think the first thing that was really crucial and pivotal for me was that I decided to borrow a microscope. With the microscope, I was able to identify the type of dino, and what I had was Amphidinium. There are many different forms of dinos, and some of them go into the water column at night, which in that case, it can be easily removed through a good UV sterilizer. However, Amphidinium, the type that I had, it would usually bury itself into the sandbed, so having a UV sterilizer would not get rid of it. The bright side to that is that this particular form of dino is less toxic than other forms, so my snails and my fishes did not really die. And also they did not grow on the rocks, which meant that most of my corals survived. I must be upfront with you that in the process of dealing with my dinos, I actually lost 2 torches, 2 SPS, and also a couple of scollies. So looking back, I don't think that I could have done much better in how I handled it. I think that the fact that I increased my nutrients, it just really took a toll on some of my corals. And now that the dinos are completely gone, my main focus has been on colouring them back up. And those that had lost some colours, I'm hoping that in due time they will gain their colours back. I decided to increase the nutrients also because the low nutrients was the cause of my dinos. I had a test kit that kind of gave me some questionable numbers in the aspect of where my nutrients was at. And I do believe in the nutrients deprived environment, actually things went wrong. So for many people, this is the reason why dinos appear. It's usually due to a low nutrient environment. And I think looking back, if I could pinpoint, I would definitely do a ICP test more often just to ensure that my test kits are in tune. In an ideal world whereby you have unlimited time, I think having 2 test kits works best. But in my case, I just can't find it in me to test one particular parameter with 2 test kits. It just doesn't make much sense to me. So I guess the middle ground for that is to have an ICP test along the way, just to ensure that your test kit is more or less in tune. In my research of solving dinos, I have not only learned a lot about the taxonomy of the various species, but also the various reasons why they occur. But for me, one thing has remained constant, and that is, as much as possible, I want to keep things as natural as possible. So what that meant is that a lot of the steps that I taken actually follows the rule that I do not want to add in any chemicals or any additives that might cause harm or might shake the balance within the tank. But of course, with that being said, I did add some additives which I will go through later. And that was really a calculated risk that I decided to take, and I just couldn't find any other options of dealing with my dino. So in general, just a broad overview, what worked was that I decided to induce a diatom bloom in my tank. And as the diatoms grew, it actually crowded out some of the dinos. So as you grow diatoms, which is this rusty looking algae, they will grow over the Amphidinium, and that starves them out, because the Amphidinium does not get the light that is required to grow. So this will eventually crowd them out and they will die. So the first step for me of having a diatom bloom is to create a proper environment for them to grow, and that actually just means having sufficient nutrients. In my case, I decided to increase the nitrates to between 13 to 15 ppm and my phosphates to around 0.07 to 0.09 ppm. This is what I've seen others do to ensure that their diatoms have enough nutrients to bloom and grow. I tried to ensure that during the whole course of these past 2 months that my nitrates and phosphates did not fluctuate as much. And how I did that was that I really put in the effort to do water tests every 2 days. Just mainly the 2 parameters of nitrates and phosphates. And this really gave me a good pulse on the nutrients in the tank. The second aspect of creating the proper environment was to dose silicates. In an environment where dinos are rampant, they consume most of the nutrients, so you kind of want to create an environment in which it is more favorable to have diatoms to grow. And this usually means dosing silicates. Silicates are a key fuel for diatoms, which is why in many tanks that you've set up, you actually do experience diatoms at the early stage because of the release of silicates from the dry rocks. So the choice of silicates that I chose was to dose Sponge XL. And the reason for that is I just couldn't find any other alternatives, so this was the closest alternative that I could find. And I dosed it to my tank till I reached a ppm of 1. So most successful reefers when dealing with dinos, they actually would aim for around 2 to 3 ppm, but in my case, as I started to dose it and I started to see diatoms grow at 1 ppm, I just kept it constant at that range because I don't think there will be much issues, but I just didn't want to rock the boat or to increase it to 2 to 3 ppm. The third aspect was to add other natural competitors. Throughout the course of the weeks, I added phytoplankton and Microbacter 7 to help in fighting with the dinos for the nutrients. And also, as the algae grew on the side of all my walls, I actually left one side of the wall completely untouched. And the reason for that is because I wanted the algae to build up on the wall. So you must understand that when algae grows on the wall, they actually, or not just on the wall, they grow on your rockscape, they actually start to help to consume the nutrients. So that helps to compete with the dinos for the nutrients that are within the water column. So what is helpful is that you try your best not to clean your glass as often. However, for me, I couldn't stand that I couldn't see my tank at all, so I just left one side of the wall of the tank completely algae filled. The final aspect in the battle with my dinos was to add fighting conch snails. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but I'll just go with that. So as the dinos were more or less gone, that was what I added to help to clean the sandbed. I could tell because A, I had a microscope, and also B, I had some form of die-offs, and that actually caused my nitrates and phosphates to start to rise. So with my sandbed full of diatoms, I added these conch snails and they started to eat the diatoms on the sandbed, and that really helped to restore the sand back to its pristine white. Honestly, I do not know if the conch snail actually ate some of the dinos, but what I do know is that they work great on diatoms, and that helped to really stir the sand and keep it really clean. I think reflecting back on my dinos and how I handled it, I do feel that I could have done a couple of things differently. I think A, I would have moved some of my corals to my local fish shop or my friend's tank, because I actually lost quite a lot of corals in this 2 months process. And to be exact, I lost 8 corals, and that's a huge amount. And I think it wasn't fair to expect that as I raised my nutrients that every coral would be happy. I also felt that checking my test kit was a key element of reef keeping that I missed out. I had always trusted my test kits, but I needed to be sure that it was accurate in the first place, and I failed to do that. So maybe having an ICP test should have been done maybe once every 2 months or so. I also might not have added Microbacter 7 because I think that it actually reduced my nutrients quite significantly, which might have caused my tank to take a longer time to have a diatom bloom. So hopefully if you are battling dinos now, these will be some of the helpful tips. Alright, onto some questions that I had from the comments, as well as some questions that I personally had before solving my dino issue. I know many people do stop water changes when battling dinos, but I think for me, I don't really quite believe in that. I subscribe to that school of thought because I think there are other trace elements that you are replacing as you do water changes, and having that routine of my weekly water changes. I just wasn't sure if I had stopped doing water changes if it would impact my corals. It was also with the same mind that I still fed my coral food to the tank and to my corals, and the reason is also to help with increasing the nutrients. I see many people say that they should not dose coral food and aminos when you have dinos because it will fuel the dinos. I wouldn't say I entirely agree. I think it really depends on the state of dinos in your tank. If your tank is completely covered in dinos, the coral food will for sure fuel their growth. But if your tank was like mine, whereby it was kind of getting out of hand but not quite there, I do believe that adding coral food actually helped to increase my nutrients, and that was helpful in my attempt to induce a diatom bloom. Another key aspect was if a microscope was needed, and I cannot tell you how much I hate to say this, but I do feel that in 95% of cases you do need a microscope. I just don't know how you'll be able to identify your dinos and know when to stop dosing your silicates if you do not have a microscope. It just makes things so much easier and more accurate. And this is a big deal because having a microscope allows you to identify the dinos, and being able to identify the dinos allows you to have the proper treatment for them. And it's so important because the treatments are so different. It could be ranging from using a UV sterilizer all the way to inducing a diatom bloom. So having a microscope really helps. Okay, I think that will be it for this video. I'm so glad that the tank is doing okay now, and I have entirely stopped dosing silicates to the tank. I've just started scraping the final wall of glass of algae. It looks really weird now, but every few days I do scrape a little bit of the glass because I don't want to remove all of it entirely, and that can cause a nutrient spike. I will actually remove it more and more as the weeks go by till it's completely clean. So I think this wraps up my video. Hope it has been helpful and you have been enjoying my videos. Let me guys know if you have any thoughts, questions, or advice. With that, I think I'll end my video right here. Thank you for watching. Stay safe. Love your tank. Till next time. See ya.